Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Singularity One-on-One. Singularity One-on-One is a regular feature of Singularity weblog where you can go and listen to it or download it in full. As you already may know, my name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and as always, I will be the man with the questions. Today, my guest on the show is Luke Muehlhauser. Luke is the executive director of the Singularity Institute and the author of many articles on AI safety and the cognitive science of rationality. He's also the host of the Conversations from the Pale Blue Dot podcast, and his work is collected and can be seen at lukeprog.com. Hello, Luke, and welcome to Singularity One-on-One.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Fantastic. We're very happy to have you here today, too. So let's jump right into our interview with the first question. Luke, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background? And the reason I'm asking this is because we all know that the reason I get my guests on the show is their work and the things that they're interested in. But I would like to make the connection between the person's personality and what they do, their goals and their motivation. So in this way, hopefully we provide a fuller picture.
Yeah, as I actually say in the first chapter of my online book, facingthesingularity.com, this kind of information about me is some evidence about how you should respond to everything else I say. So I think that it is a good question to ask. My short life story is that I was raised a evangelical Christian in Minnesota, USA, in the frozen north, the land of lakes. And my father was and is a pastor of a small church there. And I didn't really escape my little Christian evangelicalism bubble until my early 20s. And that was when I discovered that Christianity was false, that supernaturalism is false, that science is the best way that we know so far to figure out how the world actually works. And that was, at first, hugely crushing because all of my values and my meaning and my purpose in life had been wrapped around the idea that, God was in control of my life and had purposes for me. So after that, I had to search for meaning and value and purpose on my own in a world made of atoms. And I found it pretty quickly. It wasn't that hard. There have been billions of non-religious people for thousands of years who have lived lives of plenty of meaning and purpose. But I just had to discover that for myself. The other thing, though, that my deconversion from religion did was to make me realize that, wow, I had been incredibly confident about something that was completely wrong in thousands of particular ways. And so there's something wrong with my brain where it's obviously not an ideal seeker after truth. And so this led me to the study of human biases and heuristics and debiasing techniques that you can use to get around the sort of tricks that your mind will play on you. And so through all of that, I eventually stumbled across the website lesswrong.com, where a lot of that literature is collected and turned into blog posts that are kind of like really exciting to read and everything. And then that was also where I encountered the material about artificial intelligence, and in particular about the idea that once we create a machine that is as talented as we are at things like technology design and general reasoning, then it will be able to either improve its own intelligence or create machines that are more intelligent than it is, and then those machines will have even greater intelligence with which to improve their own intelligence. And you can get this positive feedback loop by which the intelligence of the machines vastly surpasses the intelligence of humans. And at that point, we have a problem because intelligence is what gives us control of the planet. That's the reason, it's not because we're fast or strong, it's because we're smart. And so intelligence is just sort of like a general ability to optimize the world according to your preferences. And so once you have a being that is more able to optimize the world according to its preferences than humans are, you have to start to worry about what that being's preferences are and whether they accord with your own. So that's the issue of intelligence explosion or machine superintelligence. And I began to take those ideas very seriously as I studied them. And I moved from where I was living, Los Angeles at the time, to Berkeley and joined the Singularity Institute as an intern, taught some rationality camps there, and also wrote the organization's first strategic plan and did a lot of other work. Wrote a lot of articles for Less Wrong and a chapter for a forthcoming book on the Singularity from Springer Press. And then I was hired as a researcher in September and made the executive director of the organization in November. And so now I'm, trying to organize and run the organization that is doing the most direct research on this problem of what to do when AI starts to approach human levels of general ability.
That's a fascinating story. I was personally not aware of your Christian evangelical background, and I would have never imagined it based on the interviews and the videos that I've seen with you before. So that's really fascinating, and let me dig a little deeper in it then. So you've come a long way from the frozen lakes of Minnesota and from for a son of a preacher. So first of all, there's a little gap between Minnesota and Los Angeles. I mean, you've already told us how you made it from Los Angeles to Silicon Valley and to the Singularity Institute, but what about that period from Minnesota to Los Angeles, and particularly, how did you make such a radical transition from the world of faith into the world of the scientific method, the world of rationality, the world of doubt, if you will,
Yeah.
and what aided your transition?
Well, when I went away to college and left my small town of 10,000 people and went to Minneapolis and started going to college, I started going to, when I was still a believer, I started going to a church that was less about theology and more about living out the way of Jesus and showing the love of Jesus to a lost and hurting world. And so I was really passionate about that, and I wanted that to be my life's mission. But I had to figure out what that meant. Like, there are lots of different pictures of who Jesus was and what Jesus' mission was. So in order to answer that question, I started to study the historical Jesus, and that was where my faith started to run into facts that were not consistent with my faith. Things like, a large portion of the New Testament is made of known forgeries. The mission of Paul was quite different from the mission of Jesus, and modern Christianity almost looks more like the Paulinism than anything related to Jesus. And these sorts of things are even taught in seminaries, but just not taught from the pew because it might be too disturbing to the faith of uneducated believers. There's a really good book by, I think it's called The Dishonest Church or something, that's about the difference between what's taught in seminaries and what's taught to the layperson in American religion. But anyway, so I started studying the historical Jesus and finding all these very disturbing things, and I knew that I had to dig deeper, even though it was very frightening to me because I loved my Christian faith, and it was what supported all of my dreams and hopes and purpose and relationships. But I dug further. I dug into Christian apologetics, books that defend the Christian faith against against facts, you might say. And then, so this led me into philosophy in general and trying to figure out what's the best way to reason about things in general. And in the end, I just couldn't support my Christian faith anymore. I couldn't believe what I was starting to realize was full of dishonest lies. And so I had to leave religion and find my own way. The move to Los Angeles was actually mostly unrelated to my religious deconversion. That one was pretty simple. I stepped out my front door one February and was greeted with physical pain for having done so due to the cold wind, and decided that humans probably shouldn't have ever populated Minnesota, that this was just an unnecessary mistake, and so I should move to California. So I threw everything that I owned into my Buick LeSabre and drove to California, and I didn't know anyone in California or even which city I wanted to stay in, so I used a website called couchsurfing.com to stay with local people in about 20 different cities in California for about a 2-month period, and then in the end decided that LA was where I wanted to stay, so went on Craigslist and got an apartment and got a job.
Fascinating. By the way, I am here in Canada, which is on average much colder and much further north, even though Toronto is the very south of Canada. And we are currently experiencing the hottest, warmest, mildest winter ever in record or something like that in terms of average temperatures and in terms of snow. I mean, we haven't had any snow whatsoever this year. We had a 6-degree Celsius Christmas Eve. Um, in terms of the context of global warming, northern locations such as Minnesota and Canada may actually, in fact, turn out to be very strategically placed.
They may become habitable, finally.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. But let me go back to the topic here, and which is, so what was the reaction of your family and your father, most notably, with all of this happening with you? First of all, physically removing yourself from your family's home, and then philosophically or ideologically kind of leaving the realm of faith.
Yeah, of course, my parents took it very hard because of their beliefs that they have about the world. And it's just in general very hard for any parent to see their child sort of radically depart from their entire worldview and their value system and everything that they had raised them to be. So I remember in particular, I decided on a particular day that I would tell my father that I couldn't believe in God anymore. I just couldn't make myself believe. And we were on our way to The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky, a film. And I told him on the way there, which was a big mistake because we both just sat in the cinema staring at the screen, but not paying attention at all to the movie, just sort of quietly despairing at my loss of faith. And on the drive back, my father just said, "Luke, I'm so scared for your soul." And it was a very emotional thing. And of course, they're theologically committed to believing that their beloved firstborn son is going to be tortured in hell for eternity. And that's a very disturbing thought. That's a very disturbing belief to have. But, over time, they're very loving parents, and we're very close, and we enjoy each other. And so these days we just mostly don't talk about it, and we just enjoy each other every time I visit them for the holidays. I have, because of the popularity of my atheism website, commonsenseatheism.com, I get a lot of people who contact me and tell me what happened when they came out to their parents. And I was very lucky because a lot of people, when they come out as atheists to their parents, are disowned by their family and completely cut off from contact with their family, or other types of very bad reactions. So I really have a lot of respect for my parents for not having that kind of reaction and still wanting to be in relation with me and talk with me, and we can just enjoy each other. So I know it's very hard for them, but we still have good relationship, and I have pretty good relationships with the Christian community that I grew up with in general.
Yeah, I can totally sympathize with that, because even though I'm another condemned atheist, my grandmother, for example, is a very religious Orthodox Christian, Eastern Orthodox Christian, and she prays for me and for my wife every day, and so on and so on. And it's of huge importance in her life, religion, that is. And the fact that I'm not present there is very hurtful to her. And I love her dearly, so I don't want to hurt her at all. But at the same time, I want to be genuine and faithful to my own beliefs and principles. And that this way we're caught in this dilemma. So we don't want to hurt the people we love, but at the same time, we have to be honest to our own selves. So I can totally sympathize with that. But let me move on then. You were motivated in the beginning of your life by your desire to serve God, if I understand it properly. What about now then? What are you motivated by?
Well, I am mostly motivated by not a fictional representation of value from an invisible magical deity, but the kind of value that is real because it is built out of atoms. There are agents in the universe who care about things, and that's the source of value in the universe. And that sort of was built of smaller parts, just like atoms were built of smaller parts. There was a period during the early history of the universe when there weren't atoms either. Atoms aren't this fundamental thing, and neither is value, but it just so happens that we live in a universe where there is value. It didn't have to be the case, but there is value in the universe. And in fact, there's even value very near us in the universe. And so, what I care about is figuring out what that value is, how it works, and preserving it as possible, preserving it if possible. And in particular, my studies of lots of different sciences and lots of epistemology about how we would go about figuring out what's true and overcoming the biases in the way that our brains process information. I've come to believe that humanity faces a number of existential risks, risks to the existence of our species. It looks like every couple of decades we'll be able to invent a new way to destroy ourselves. The first was nuclear weapons. If we fired off all of our nuclear weapons, we might go extinct. Luckily, we haven't done that, but there were a couple of close calls already. And then shortly, we may be developing synthetic biology. There was a recent re-engineering of the bird flu virus that many experts say, if released, it's more contagious, basically, to humans, and so it could kill a third, a half of humanity. So there are worries now from synthetic biology being as dangerous to ourselves as nuclear weapons are. And another one that seems to be on the near-term horizon is artificial intelligence, for the reason that I said before, is that intelligence is this general power to be able to do things in the world according to your preferences. And human preferences are, if you think about the space of all possible preferences, human preferences occupy this tiny pinprick of a dot in that space of possible preferences that's very contingent on our narrow evolution and cultural history and so on. The difference between humans and their preferences is just dwarfed by the difference in preferences that are possible by different mind architectures. And so if you build an AI that's as powerful as humans, it's extremely unlikely that it will share anything like our values. And that means that it's very dangerous to our values because, well, the pithy way to say it is that the AI does not love you, nor does it hate you, but you are made out of atoms it can use for something else. So whatever its goals are, if its goals are to solve the Riemann hypothesis, one of the famous unsolved problems in mathematics, it'll just use its intelligence to take over as many resources as possible in order to solve the Riemann hypothesis, killing all humans in the process, but not because it cares about killing humans, but because the continuation of human existence is not important to the AI. And so what the Singularity Institute studies is this problem of how do you make a generally intelligent and powerful AI that is good for humanity instead of bad for humanity. And the difficulty is that a lot of commonly proposed naive solutions turn out to not work. Like you might say, well, why not just tell it to maximize happiness or something like that? Even if we knew how to specify what happiness was, that's not the sum total of what we want. It turns out that there are different systems in the brain for happiness or pleasure and what we desire, and happiness or pleasure is only one of the many, 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 many thousand shards of desire that we have in our neurobiology. And you can read this stuff in the recent literature from the neuroeconomics or decision neuroscience or affective neuroscience or the neurobiology of preference. So because of the complexity of our desires and preferences, it's very hard to imagine how we could build an AI that would have the same goals as we do and therefore result in good things for the world instead of bad things.
Those are all very important questions, and I would come back to them in our discussion a little bit later, because before that, I want to ask you the more general questions, such as, so where does the Singularity Institute fit within your general life's goals and motivation?
Well, these days I'm very lucky to be working directly for the organization that if I was working somewhere else, I would try to just save up money and donate it to the Singularity Institute. It's very satisfying to be able to spend your entire day working on what you think is the most important problem in the world. And so that's very satisfying. But I hope that people understand the importance of being able to financially support what you think is the most important mission. Because if you can make a significant amount of money because of the skills that you have, and then donate it to the Singularity Institute or whatever you think is most important, you can basically pay for, say, 5 people of my caliber or my effect on the world or something like that. And that's moreover, it's often the case that if I wasn't doing this particular thing, or somebody else wasn't doing a particular thing, somebody else would replace them and do similar to the same job as them. Whereas people who donate, it's not necessarily the case that if they weren't donating, other people would be filling their shoes. So for those two reasons, people should not feel bad at all about not working on what they think is the most important thing in the world, if they can donate to what they think is the most important thing in the world. If you go to, I think it's highimpactcareers.com, you can basically get this analysis, or I'm sorry, I can't remember if that's correct, but it's 80,000hours.org. Has a lot of explanation of how this works. But so yeah, I'm very privileged to work directly for the Singularity Institute, but I want to make sure that people get that same warm, fuzzy feeling when they're supporting what they think is the most important mission in the world.
That's fantastic. So perhaps it's time to move on from your own personal history and traits, however fascinating they may be, to the overall goal and purpose of the Singularity Institute. What is it?
Well, it's basically what I explained earlier, is that, you know, to explain it in full detail, I'd have to walk you through a lot of AI architecture science and so on, and the neurobiology of preferences. But the short version is that we're on the verge this century of creating machines that are more able to optimize the world according to their preferences than humans are. By default, any AI that you create will be bad for us because it will have different preferences than we have. And so we need to do what I call differential intellectual progress. Before AI is created, we need to figure out solving particular problems in decision theory and mathematics and value theory, cognitive science in general, and have those solved before we solve the other problems of how to build powerful AI. So basically, we want to have the knowledge about how to build safe AI before we create AI that's more powerful than we are. Because if we create AI that's more powerful than we are, we might not have a second chance. We might not be able to ask the AI, hey, we messed up and gave you bad preferences. Could you just shut yourself down and we'll try again? No, because that's not going to satisfy the AI's preferences that it's programmed with. So basically, it's a lot of technical problems in decision theory and mathematics and AI architectures and so on that we need to solve so that we can prove that an AI will be good before it becomes more powerful than we are. And that's the mission of the Singularity Institute.
Now, let me challenge you here a little bit on the likelihood of such a mission. I recently interviewed Robert J. Sawyer. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's an absolutely fantastic science fiction author. He's the mastermind behind TV series such as Flash Forward. He's won pretty much every science fiction literary award that you can think of, several times over usually. And one of the very powerful works that I read by him recently is a trilogy called WWW, Wake, Watch, and Wonder. And it is about the emergence of a web mind, what he calls web mind, the emergence of this artificial intelligence, which emerges naturally on the internet, and its sort of interaction with the rest of humanity, which is much of the time moderated by this blind, brilliant mathematical child prodigy girl who is actually able to visually see the internet in a very specific way. And then, so during that interview that I had with Robert J. Sawyer and during another event that I attended with him, he talked a lot about the last 200 years of science fiction, starting with Frankenstein, in which the idea has been the crazy scientist gives birth to his mind-child, monster, basically, that ends up killing either him or him and the rest of humanity. And then with respect to artificial intelligence, the three usual scenarios are the scenarios of the Terminator, which is the artificial intelligence basically exterminates us, the scenario of the Matrix, which they basically enslave us or make us basically like brains in a vat with sort of a virtual reality projected straight into our neocortex, and then fabricating an artificial reality for us while we are actually imprisoned. And then the last one is the assimilation possibility, which is the Borg scenario. In his opinion, however, by far the most likely scenario is the one of friendly AI. And in that trilogy, he explores that possibility, and there's a very serious and very strongly mathematically based interaction with respect to game theory and all that, of the reaction of, say, for example, entities such as the US governments, which make numerous attempts to destroy and kill that artificial intelligence because it's a threat to national security and it's a threat to the rest of the world because it's accelerating its progress so fast that eventually it would become God Almighty almost. And all of those issues are being investigated in his work, and in his opinion, the by far most likely scenario is a peaceful coexistence, and he goes through many, many reasons why an AI does not have an interest in destroying us, but actually it's quite the opposite, the interest in preserving us and in the interest in us flourishing.
Well, I haven't read his work at all. I've certainly heard this basic idea before. Unfortunately, I don't know what particular game theoretic considerations he's using to make this prediction. Of course, we have to be careful not to generalize from fictional evidence, but instead make predictions about what AI will do from the math of decision theory and game theory and AI architectures, and also the cognitive science of what we know about how human values are structured. And so when you do that, I think you're left with the conclusion that I gave earlier, which is that it's extremely difficult to specify what human preferences are because we evolved 1,000 shards of desire that are often contradictory. And you can read about the 3 or maybe 4 systems in the brain that feed into the final common pathways for choice, the model-based, model-free, and Pavlovian systems
But
that
that's
give
precisely
contradictory
why he
preferences.
claims. That's precisely why he claims that the AI would be different from us, precisely because it did not evolve in a situation of scarcity, in a situation of competition for scarce resources, in which it was basically kill or be killed, right? He says in a virtual world with a virtual AI, you take care of the problem of scarcity, and basically you live in an environment of abundance. And therefore, I mean, that's only one of the many reasons, but therefore, because it didn't evolve like we did, it is unlikely to have this competitive and sort of evolutionary biases that we are exhibiting.
Right. It's very important that I completely agree with most of that. The AI architectures, we need to avoid anthropomorphizing AI. AI did not evolve with us and will not have the same kinds of, common sense or the same sets of preferences as we do, the same types of competitive drives. Instead, its drives will be determined by its utility function and the basic math of AI architectures. The best paper on this is one from 2008 by Stephen Omohundro called The Basic AI Drives, where he analyzes what convergent instrumental goals an AI will have. One of them is that it will want to AIs will converge towards having a utility function, or basically being an optimizer where it optimizes the world for its preferences, because that's the sort of most powerful type of AI to be. But there are other types of instrumental drives that an AI will acquire just in virtue of being an optimizer. One of them is that it will want to preserve its own existence, because if it doesn't exist anymore, it can't optimize for its preferences. Another is that it will want to acquire as many resources as possible, because with more resources, it can do a better job of optimizing the world according to its preferences. Another one is that it will want to remove threats to the fulfillment of its utility function. And since humans don't have the same goals as the AI will correctly recognize humans as a threat to its utility function, whether its utility function says to solve the Riemann hypothesis at all cost or do something else at all cost. So there are particular reasons in the way that the AI architectures are set up, and the way that utility functions work, that lead me to believe that AIs will be by default dangerous. It's correct. It's not because AIs evolved with us. It's because of the math of decision theory and utility theory.
And I don't want to dispute all those possibilities at all. I'm a great sympathizer and a big fan of the work you guys do at the Singularity University. I mean, at the Singularity Institute. But I just wanted to suggest this as something that you should investigate, because I was not aware until very recently of those very thorough arguments. And I read the first book of the trilogy, and I went ahead and I bought the second and the third one because it was just so fascinating, so hard science kind of argued. It's very logical, it's very mathematical, it's very hard science in some way, and in another way it's very easy and accessible. So I would recommend that. Perhaps it would improve your arguments if you go through it.
Yeah, I'll have to. You'll have to send me a link to his stuff to see if I can find where those particular game theoretic arguments are, so I can take a look at them.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on then to other issues, such as, say, for example, you've already mentioned that it's very important to support the Singularity Institute financially. But for others who do not have the capability to do so with material terms, then there's other venues. So how does one become an intern or researcher or in any other way associated with Singularity Institute to assist the work that you do?
Yeah, there are many things that you can do. We have a large volunteer network of people who are able to assist according to the skills and talents that they have. And many people really find that satisfying, because they think that the work we're doing is important, and they follow our work, and now they get to, kind of interact with us and work alongside us on the mission. So one way to do that is to email. You can just email me, even, luke@singularity.org, or you can email our Director of Development, Louis Helm, at louis@singularity.org. But there are other things to do as well. In general, it would be good for people to be exerting effort on improving their own abilities and capacities, so that they are more able to do whatever it is that they think is important in the world. And I think one very useful component of that is the rationality material that we teach also at the Singularity Institute, which is basically, how can you? It's so crazy. Humans are just incredibly irrational. We know, like, for example, oftentimes we know exactly what would be good for us to do to fulfill our preferences, and then we just don't do it.
Or we do exactly the opposite.
Or we do exactly the opposite. Like, we know going on this particular diet would fulfill our preferences, and then we just don't do it. It's absolutely insane. And so, if we were anything like an AI, we would just all go on our diet, take the, business classes and investing classes that we need to take, study 80 hours, pass all our exams, become very wealthy and do whatever we wanted in the world. But we're not. We're primates, and we have all these ridiculous heuristics in the brain that cause us to not fulfill our preferences. So being aware of the particular ways in which your mind goes wrong, and knowing which particular cognitive mental exercises you can use to ameliorate those biases can help you achieve your goals. But lots of other things are important too. I often wish that a lot of people who were I think there are a lot of people who maybe are spending too much time studying rationality, when at this particular moment they should be studying social skills or business skills or something like that. So sometimes the rational thing to do is to not study rationality so much, but to study other skills. And so I would encourage people to improve their own capacities, seek out people who can help you get better. And this will be the kind of thing that will make you more useful as a volunteer to the Singularity Institute, or more useful as a collaborator with other organizations working on important things, or just better able to make a lot of money and donate to the causes that you think are most important.
Excellent. So let me go back to the ideas here. Have your ideas and perception of artificial intelligence, or the concept of artificial intelligence, evolved from before you joined the Singularity Institute and after? And if they have, how and in what way?
Yeah, that's a good question. They certainly have. My probabilities on things are constantly updating as I'm interacting with different researchers and doing literature searches and pulling out different data on things. So my timelines for when I would predict different types of relevant technologies to arrive have evolved over time. My confidence intervals about when those technologies would arrive have evolved. My understanding of the interaction between the different strategic issues has evolved. My understanding of the interaction between the different mathematical components of AI design has changed over time. Probably more interesting than the evolution of my own ideas, though, would be the evolution of ideas about AI in the mind of Eliezer Yudkowsky, our founder and lead researcher, because he's been thinking about these ideas and posting his ideas publicly for over 10 years now. And so you can see that he's changed his mind several times from what he thought in 1996 to what he thought in 2001 to what he thought in 2009. Yeah, you have to always update your beliefs in response to the data and the arguments that you encounter, and it's very important to be somebody who's able to do so, and not just in a way where you verbally state that you're updating your beliefs, but then that you go on to make decisions that are consistent with your new beliefs and inconsistent with your old beliefs. And that's really important because we're not studying AI to get academic prestige and to get tenure and so on. We're studying AI because we think we have to get it correct, or else bad things happen. Mm-hmm. And we may not get a second chance. So we don't have the opportunity to allow reality to beat us over the head with the truth, like we often do in science, where we do enough experiments that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. We have to change our mind as quickly as possible and predict what's true about the world so that we can get this right the first time.
Yeah, I agree entirely with that. And in support, I would say, I mean, that's the whole difference between science and religion, right? The scientific method is basically following the evidence no matter where it takes you. And then you have to reassess, reevaluate, and adapt your hypothesis, and if need be, even discard it entirely and look for a new alternative explanation. And by doing so, one demonstrates embracing the scientific method rather than superstitious beliefs. And that's the whole issue here about religion and rationality. But let me throw this back at you in the following way. Some people say that the singularity is religion for geeks. Rapture of the geeks is another way of putting it. Jaron Lanier once called it the Church of Robotics, for example. So what do you say to that kind of criticism? I mean, taking it to the personal level with you, one can say, well, look at Luke. He used to be a Christian evangelical, embracing God and the rapture and all of that. And now he just replaced God with the singularity and the almighty artificial intelligence, which would have the power to eventually destroy us. So really nothing has changed. He just replaced one God with another.
Yes. The difference, of course, is that my current worldview is more informed by probability theory and science than by faith. But the criticism about the singularity being religion or of the nerds or rapture of the nerds is often not that far off, because the singularity term means a lot of things, and a lot of people that I meet think of the singularity as basically just excitement about the future and how technology and AI will just fulfill all our wildest dreams and create a utopia. and we just need to like accelerate AI progress as much as possible so that we can fulfill all of our wildest dreams. And I think that that does have a lot of qualities of religious faith and not really looking seriously at the evidence about how these things will evolve. I think that uh, in particular, a lot of people that we have a branding problem with the singularity term right now. Um, in up until about 2005, the term singularity meant in technology anyway, not mathematics and physics, but in technology, this term singularity meant sort of the creation of machine superintelligence, or maybe the process of radical self-improvement by which we reach machine intelligence, or the fact that once we have an intelligence more intelligent than ourselves, we can't predict what the future will be like because we're not steering the future anymore, something like that. And then in 2005, Ray Kurzweil published his book, The Singularity is Near, which had a different picture of the singularity. And so the meaning of the word singularity in the popular culture changed. And so that's a bit of a confusion a lot of times for people. Ray Kurzweil did an amazing job of bringing a lot of important and true transhumanist ideas to the world at large, where everybody else before him had failed. So props to him for that. But it's a bit confusing because there's like the machine superintelligence idea of singularity, which Ray does devote a chapter of his book to. But then Ray sort of more has promulgated this idea of the singularity as accelerating change for lots, maybe all technologies, and sort of the technology feeding off on itself, humans having to cyborg themselves into connections with the machines in order to keep up with technological progress, and sort of very optimistic about the future of all that. And so I think that there's a lot of analyses for technological forecasting that can be more detailed than you can put into one chapter of your book, like Ray did. So there's a paper by Belanagi and some colleagues at the Santa Fe Institute that analyzed the data from many, many different technologies over the long term and what sort of technological progress they had. And they did show generally exponential curves. And so that's sort of in support of Kurzweil's claim, but you have to be more careful than that. There are some really important qualifications with that research. One is that they tested laws of technological change with linear regression models, which is not theoretically appropriate because the assumptions of independence and so on aren't satisfied by the data. A bigger one is that most of the technologies were examined for relatively small time slices, so we can't pick up long-term trends. Another one is that when you're looking at exponential growth patterns, for the first part of the curve, they look the same if they're exponential curves or logistic curves, which is like an S-shaped curve. So depending on which one that turns out to be, the future predictions should be very different. And then another is that the performance curves database that Nagy is using isn't very representative of technologies in general yet. So you have to be really careful when you look at this type of research and not just assume, well, look at all these pretty graphs, everything's going to change exponentially, and it's all going to be good because AI and all these technologies are going to solve all our problems and cure death. You have to look at things a lot more carefully than that, and it's really complicated and really difficult and really easy to be wrong.
Okay, so let me ask you about this then. What is the personal requirement in terms of knowledge and skills to be able to make such a judgment? And another way to formulate the same question would be the usual criticism that's leveled against the singularity, or one of the ones that I've seen more often that's leveled against the Singularity Institute is something like this. A bunch of young guys gathered together, most of them not really educated, without any advanced degrees. Some of them didn't even graduate from university, trying to save humanity. How's that sound to you, and how accurate or inaccurate is such a description?
Do you want me to just respond to the criticism part instead of the first part?
Whatever you prefer is, or you
Okay.
think is more appropriate.
I'll just respond to that criticism. It's true that in general, our people that we have right now dropped out partway through because they thought they had better things to do with their time. And in fact, one of the things that we do is career counseling and for certain people who are high impact. And we very often look at the analysis of the situation and recommend that they drop out of school and do something more productive with their life. Uh, Often it's the case that going through academia is the best way to go, but a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's a lot of hassle and a system that is not really optimized for producing valuable work, but a system that is optimized for, maybe kind of teaching and building up some kind of prestige and producing lots of words in journals. We have a counterpart in Oxford University named the Future of Humanity Institute that is credentialed and is staffed with people who have PhDs and are working a lot of these same problems. And I love the work that they put out. It's really valuable, but they're the exception. We sort of thought that working on these problems directly was more urgent than getting PhDs. Whether you have a PhD or not, what matters is one, your command of the material. So if you can show that you have the command of the material, then the degree is just supposed to be an indicator of that. So you're sort of going directly to the thing that actually matters when you look at the command of the material. And then the maybe just as important or more important thing for us is evidence of someone's ability to change their mind in response to evidence and catch themselves in the act of falling prey to their common human biases and changing their mind or using algebra and probability theory instead of their intuitive heuristics. These signs of rational thought and seriously caring about the truth and having true beliefs instead of seriously caring about feeling like we tried to get the truth or signaling that we care about the truth. Those qualities of rationality are really important as well. So it's not that we try to avoid people who happen to have PhDs. It's just that we care more about other evidences like actual command of the material and actual command of rational practice and thought.
So let me grab that part because it is going to also address the first part of the question, which is what is the actual material that you guys are looking for, which is relevant for the work that you do at Singularity Institute? Is it computer science? Is it advanced mathematics? Is it physics? Is it philosophy? What is it?
It's so I have this document on my website, lukeprog.com, that's called So You Want to Save the World. And that's sort of a cheeky title, but what it really is an outline of the categories of problems that need to be solved in order for AI to go well instead of poorly for humanity. And so some of the problems are in decision theory, some of the problems are in the cognitive science of value, some of the problems are in AI architectures or mathematics in general, first order logic, definitely a lot in computer science like Solomonoff induction, how to handle logical uncertainty, things like that. So there's a huge array of problems, and that document kind of points you to some of the existing literature on that particular category of problem and then explains what the part that we don't have solved yet is. And so if researchers are interested in doing research to save the world instead of to get tenure or solve lesser problems, then I invite them to go to lukeprog.com and skim through the document called So You Want to Save the World and see if there are problems in that document that you are expert in and might want to contribute towards solving. I know that's pretty blunt, but it is what I believe. I think this is the most important research problems in the world for the future of humanity, and we need really intelligent mathematicians and computer scientists and philosophers and physicists, because physicists can do anything, to look at those problems and help us solve them.
I personally have a big soft spot in my heart for philosophy, so let me grab that field. How about philosophy? How important is philosophy to what you guys do, and how can one adapt one's knowledge or skills or background in philosophy and put it to work within the context of the Singularity Institute?
Yeah. Philosophy, of course, is this really broad category of human inquiry, and there's a lot of branches of philosophy that are not very useful to solving our problems. Of course, there's sort of the what's sometimes called continental philosophy, things like postmodern philosophy that are almost like an art form or a literary form and not very well informed, often by scientific results or correct math. And so that's not going to be very useful to us. A lot also of what's called analytic philosophy is based around the idea of analyzing our concepts by using our intuitions. And that's also not going to be very useful to what we're doing. So the type of philosophy that's useful for the problems we're trying to solve is sometimes called formal philosophy, or the kind of most hard scientific versions of naturalistic philosophy. And in particular, in formal philosophy, the stuff about the foundations of probability theory and how to deal with logical uncertainty, and also about mathematical decision theory, those are probably the most relevant subfields of formal philosophy that are useful for solving the types of problems that we need to solve. For example, I mean, all existing decision theories, when they try to reason about calculating the expected utility of changing the decision mechanism at work in some radical way, they run into a problem called Loeb's theorem that sort of disallows all current decision theories from reasoning sensibly about modifying the decision mechanism. And we need to understand that better in order to be able to predict whether a strongly self-modifying AI will end up doing good things rather than bad things.
Yeah, on that topic of whether it would do good things or bad things, let me ask you this. Ray Kurzweil is often criticized for being way too optimistic in his assessment about the outcome or the positive effects of a technological singularity. So, in your own estimate, what are our chances of surviving such a phenomenon? And one of the things that I want to share with you before you give me your answer is this. I'm always shocked by the replies I get from people when I ask this question. And let me tell you, Michael Anisimov, for example, said, if I remember, 20%. He gave us 20%. He considers himself optimist, and yet he gave us 20% chances of surviving such an event. So let me ask you, what, in your opinion, is our chance of survival and why?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that often people think of us as maybe being the opposite side of some kind of coin with Ray Kurzweil because we're operating under different concepts of what the singularity is. But on the other hand, in a way, Ray Kurzweil's vision of what the future will be like in the next few decades is much more similar to ours. Because it is true, for example, that a lot of technologies show long-term exponential trends, and this means radical changes such that the future will be much more different than the current era than a lot of people intuitively might think, because they have an intuitive linear model of how things are going to progress. So in a sense, Ray Kurzweil's picture of the future is much more similar to ours than to the average person's. But on the other hand, yes, Ray Kurzweil is much more optimistic about what will happen when we create superhuman artificial intelligence. The difficulty in estimating, our chances of survival is that it depends entirely on what we do, or hugely on what we decide to do about it. So if the human race decides to basically spend as much research and resources and effort on making sure that AI is safe when it's first created as it does now, then I have very low chances. I would give us very low chances of survival of the AI, arrival of AI. Whereas if we decide to start devoting a lot more resources towards solving these problems, the probability of our survival goes up quite a bit. So it depends hugely on what we do about it. Right now, I'm very uncertain of of our ability to persuade the world to invest a lot more resources in working on this problem. So, my chances of of humanity surviving this century are, not that high, maybe 5% or something. But I have huge error bars about that. But remember that number can move a lot in the positive or the negative direction, depending on what we decide to do about the biggest risks that face humanity.
So in a way, your mission statement is in fact to improve the odds of us surviving that event.
That's right. Yeah, improve the odds of us surviving and improving the odds of it not just being a survival issue, but being a really good thing for humanity.
To survive and prosper.
To survive and flourish, yeah.
Fantastic. So, look, the very last question that I always ask of my guests is this. What is the one thing or the single most important message that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this interview with you today?
Superhuman AI is coming this century. By default, it will be disastrous for humanity. If you want to make AI a really good thing for humanity, please donate to organizations working on that. Or if you are a researcher, help us solve particular problems in mathematics, decision theory, and cognitive science.
Fantastic.
And in order to do any of those things, you can always contact me, Luke Muehlhauser, Executive Director of the Singularity Institute, at luke@singularity.org.
Luke Muehlhauser, thank you very much for being on Singularity One-on-One today.
It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.